I'm back with another banger. Today I'm joined by Spiros, serial entrepreneur, or as I call him, serial entrepreneur, founder and CEO of Resolve AI. Resolve AI handles alerts, performs root cause analysis, troubleshoots incidents within minutes, simplified to machines on call for humans. We're going to be talking about some cool stuff today in regards to what they're building, how they're building things, running agents in production, and also some of Spiros's ethos around how he builds teams, how he builds products. Spiros, welcome.
Hi, Elliot. Thanks for having me. It's great to be on the podcast, and I appreciate the kind introduction.
No, pleasure. You've been speaking what seems like in different corners of the community. I see you popping up on LinkedIn a lot recently, really building your brand, talking about what you're doing at Resolve. Give us a bit of insight into your background, the entrepreneur, then give us a bit of insight into what you're building at Resolve and why you're building it.
Yes, and maybe to start with your comment, as a founder, multiple time founder, I'm a big believer in building in public, and being as a founder, being, let's say, the voice of the company, right? So I'm trying to do the best I can to represent the company. Now, my background, like you said, this is my fourth startup as a founder. I worked in dev tools and what we call observability today. My first company, I started my first company out of my PhD. I was I was studying at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I dropped out and started a company together with my advisor and two other PhD students. We built a system that could analyze source code and unstructured data at scale, and our product ended up being it was called Log Insight. It was like a log analytics engine back in 2008. It's similar to maybe Elastic or Splunk these days. It was very scalable, powerful tool. We were used for some of the largest enterprises at the time, and the company ended up getting acquired by VMware in 2012, and still today is used in the VMware ecosystem. It's the log analysis tool of VMware. I had the chance to work there as well from 2012 to 2015. Also, my co-founder Mayank, my co-founder at Resolve, Mayank and I know each other since grad school. We were PhD classmates since 2004, and we've been working together since 2012, since the VMware days. And in 2018, him and I and a few other people actually that are at Resolve AI, started a company called Omnition, which was a cloud-native observability solution for applications that were designed to run on the cloud. We also co-created OpenTelemetry, which is a very popular open source project now. So OpenTelemetry standardizes telemetry collection across metrics, traces, and logs. At the time, every vendor had their own proprietary agent for collecting telemetry data, and we felt that that was very limiting in what you could do, right? Because you could not connect the signals together. Also, it wasn't good for the users, right? Because they couldn't control their own data. So OpenTelemetry essentially became very, very successful because it solved this problem very well, right? We created a set of standards and an open source implementation for all of telemetry collection. Since then, it has been adopted by entire industry. It's the most active project in CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, after Kubernetes. And it's pretty much how every new product is being built in observability. My company, Omnition, had very good early traction, especially with companies that were building microservice-based applications on the cloud. And we ended up getting acquired by Splunk quite quickly, actually, a year and a half into the company. And by the way, I said I'm done with startups at the time. I thought like this was my last one. I go into Splunk. I become, I become, let's say, the GM of Splunk Observability, which is all the products Splunk has for IT and developers. Build that through like actually 6 acquisitions and a lot of organic in-house work, scale to like a large number of people, and as we're doing that and building it. One thing that happened managing like a large engineering team was that the vast majority of our effort was spent on maintaining and troubleshooting the system, right? Like there was actually really little time left to build new features at scale. And that's because obviously as software gets complex, it becomes very, very hard for anybody to know the whole system. If something goes wrong, it's very, very difficult to debug. We had times where we would actually had to freeze releases to production for months to actually stabilize the system. 90% of our SRE team resigned over a period of 6 months because of burnout, because of all these issues. So towards the end there, I guess first I realized that I'm much happier building products and companies. So I changed my mind about starting another company. But I also realized that maybe there is now with AI and what we call agentic AI today, maybe there is a way to do this much better, right? Like instead of having these tools that humans have to use and connect the dots, the idea with behind Resolve AI is to build agents that actually do the heavy lifting. They use all the tools that the human would otherwise use, right? Whether it's, let's say, GitHub, observability tools, AWS and Kubernetes, everything in between, and actually kind of do the job of a software engineer, but not the coding part per se, right? Like obviously code is an input and you need to understand it, but doing all the rest, right? And we felt like the best starting point for that is incidents and alerts when something goes wrong. It's a very stressful situation. Oftentimes you have to wake up in the middle of the night. Usually you might be dealing with a very high level, let's say, problem or symptom, which is difficult to translate to what to do next. So we felt like, first of all, it has a lot of value to let's say, to be able to do this better. But it's also, it's a very stressful task that no human really loves doing. So that's kind of the idea behind how we started Resolve AI. Of course, the idea has evolved a lot more since then, and I'm happy to share more.
Yeah, do. And I think it's awesome that you've gone through the acquisitions, you've understood how to build products, literally take it 0 to 1, 1 being the acquisition, spot an opportunity inside a large enterprise business, and actually seeing the evolve of technology, understanding, okay, here's a bit of a gap. Let's hone in on that, and let's try and understand Resolve a bit more as a product and what it does.
Yes. So basically, we think of Resolve AI as agents for software engineering, broadly speaking, right? Because in our mind, and in our experience, let's say, software engineering is a lot more than just coding, especially at scale, right? Especially when you're dealing with large production systems. Um, you can say the category we're in is an AI SRE, but in reality, it's every aspect of software engineering, right? Whether it's production, understanding, troubleshooting, etc. So you can think of Resolve as essentially an agentic system that can essentially use all the tools that are available to humans today. It can use these tools to actually develop a very deep understanding of the entire software system, from source code to, let's say, backend databases and everything in between. And I think that's something that is unique about Resolve AI. We feel like to do this well, you cannot just, let's say, essentially process telemetry through an LLM, right? That has value, right? It can summarize, it can give you some insights, but we need to really, really be able to essentially handle very complex tasks and do the work or assist humans with difficult work. You have to be able to understand the system, right? So Resolve AI builds like a very detailed understanding of like the entire software system. Think of like a very detailed graph of every component in a software system. Then it can actually reason using all that and the technology we built about in our agents, let's say. So every time there is a task to be performed, whether that's an alert or an incident, or it's a request a human has, a lot of these are novel, right? So you cannot just approach it by essentially trying to repeat or learn just from something that happened in the past. You have to be able to reason almost from fresh principles, looking at the symptoms at hand and calling tools. And it has to also learn, and that's maybe the most important, right? Like when, let's say, an expert software engineer or SRE joins a new team, they probably know how to do their job, right? But what they don't know is the environment, the system. Every company, every application is slightly different. So it takes them usually like 6 months to become kind of expert enough to be able to be actually on call, primary on call as we call it, right? Resolve follows the same idea, right? Tries to do it a lot faster, right? But it connects, it knows how to essentially perform tasks, use tools, but also it learns over time, right? So over time, the idea is it becomes an expert to actually be able to figure out all the tribal knowledge that humans possess, and we think that's very valuable in its own, right? Because it becomes the source of knowledge and truth that oftentimes only expert and very experienced engineers possess in an organization.
Nice. So inferring, reasoning, understanding really your software system in such detail, and over time being able to perform tasks, analyzing really the root cause of the problem, and probably give insights on how teams can actually solve some of these problems in their systems.
Correct. Like the way actually resolve is used is that it can be, think of it, it can be on call like every time an alert, whether it's an incident or not, right? Maybe it's a minor problem. It can pick it up automatically. It can run an investigation. Oftentimes, this investigation involves like tens, hundreds of tool calls, right? It goes into, let's say, source code. It goes into logs. It goes into metrics. It has to iterate, uh, essentially think about what's happening, right? And, continue until it finds one or two answers, depending on the situation. So it's a very hard task on its own, but also it's something that's very time consuming for humans, right? So Resolve can do all this heavy lifting and come back with an answer that then a human can execute, validate, or follow other questions. This is kind of the wartime scenario, if you wish. But then what we found is that our users and ourselves use Resolve to vibe debug all the time, meaning as an engineer or an SRE, you're dealing with all sorts of like vague questions, micro incidents, production interruptions all the time in your job, right? And the tools we have today at our disposal are kind of very low level, right? Like usually, if I'm seeing some slowness somewhere, right, I have to go check a bunch of dashboards, right? Go figure out if there is a release or a feature flag that is on, right? Like, and combine all this data across systems. So it's very, very hard to connect the dots. So the power of Resolve is that you can ask a very high level question and does all the heavy lifting of going and executing a bunch of tool calls and checking a bunch of systems, to come back and summarize very quickly what might be the reason, right? So this, what we call vibe debugging, is how the product is used all the time, right? Even outside of incidents and alerts.
I love it. I love that notion, actually. What started as a novel idea, we touched on technologies evolved rapidly. I'm keen to understand what are the engineering challenges that you're seeing inside of building Resolve, getting under the hood of actually building the product itself. If I was to walk in, what am I likely to see? The problems that you and the team are solving today for teams.
Yes. First of all, it is the hardest product I ever tried to build, actually by far. Because yes, I think we have now models that obviously enable this, right? It wasn't possible before, but still, like the distance between, let's say, what a model can do and the training the models have, because a lot of this data is not out, let's say, on the web, right? But also the ability of models to follow like a long chain of thought is not fully there yet, right? Like in our case, we're dealing with situations where you have to make like at same hundreds of tool calls, right, sequentially, and iterate. If you just give the model the tools, it will go off the rails after two calls, right? And it won't get you anywhere. So it's a very hard problem because you have to deeply understand the underlying systems, how to use them. You have to understand the problems that humans are facing, but then you have to build AI on top of it that can really reason and plan, agents that reason and plan, almost as humans, right? It's a very, very hard problem. Now, to do this well, it takes like a very, very strong team that understands both observability systems, but also like models and agents, right? And to be honest, I spend most of my time at Resolve building the team. In the sense that, like, if you ask me where I spend my time, it's mostly recruiting, because I don't think you can build like such a hard product in such a difficult, let's say, market without having like an amazing team. And our team is, like I said, a combination of experts in both of these. this is also by far the best team I've been a part of. Many of our, kind of ML research engineers come from, building AI in the consumer space, like DeepMind, for example. And these folks never worked in enterprise. They would never consider, actually. I think what changed maybe now is that because we're building AI for software engineers, it's a problem that is, uh, dear to everyone, right? Like many of us have faced this, right? Like have had to wake up in the middle of the night. They faced the challenge of actually building software at scale. So I think there is a common belief in the team that, what we're doing is going to help, it's going to change how we work. It's going to help, it's going to improve our ability to produce technology and software, which eventually it's beneficial to the world in our view, right? Like, more technology and, maybe cheaper technology helps the world. So this is kind of the background. And, to answer maybe your questions, like I'll give you a few of the challenges, right? Like I said, like the planning and reasoning the agent has to do is way more sophisticated than what the models can do, right? We spend a lot of time on that. Another interesting problem is like the learning, right? Like you want the system to become better every time it performs the task, right? Because maybe a human gives feedback or maybe it attempts to do something, it fails or succeeds, and it has to learn from it, right? And that's very, very important because that, as it becomes better and better, it can essentially solve harder problems. So that to build the infrastructure and for that, like the memory system, let's say, for that is a very, very hard problem. And the final thing is we're in a world of, let's say, tools and systems that were built for humans. So there are many, many, many limitations, really, you have to overcome when you're building an agent that works with human tools. I do think like these tools will evolve over time to be more agent friendly, but in the intermediate, you have to deal with a lot of limitations and challenges with the underlying tools and systems.
Interesting thought. I'm going to put a pin in that and come back to that. But I'm seeing that with companies building out agentic architectures, the specific knowledge, the context that they need, the learnings that they actually garner from using that system in production. It is just this feedback cycle. You need really, really strong people in those areas to be able to build those systems in the right way that actually benefits users. This is what I'm seeing being a bit of a cycle at the moment. So I can really resonate with that point.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this, right? I think it's very easy to build a demo these days with LLMs, but it's actually very, very hard to build a production system, right? That works reliably, that works, every time, that can deal with the complexities of every different environment, right? So I think we're in this situation, and I see this in the market where, give an example, like Resolve grew to like 50 plus people. It's like kind of within a year, right? And it took a lot more people, a lot more smart people in some sense that any other product tried to build because of all these complexities, right? But I think there's also probably a lot of kind of AI is very noisy, right? But I think two things I would highlight, right? Like if I'm like a person inside a bigger organization, right, and my business is not actually building agents for software engineering or SRE, right? I think I would think twice if this is an area where I want to build, right? I want to discourage anybody from building, but it's a very, very hard problem, and it takes like a very, very sophisticated team. But also, like in reality, I would also never trust a demo, to be honest, right? I would like to see something working in production because the bar for that is very, very high.
Were you the person on my LinkedIn who said, I don't think our demo's fit for purpose?
Did I post that on LinkedIn, you said?
Was it you? Maybe over the last week or so, maybe your team posted it or
Probably.
you posted it, a snapshot. Okay, fine. And it had this like similar thoughts that you've just described, that I don't think our demo actually gives us enough credit for what we've built, or similar lines.
Yeah, I mean, like a demo can always look cool, right? The question is, does that work in production? I think maybe what you're referring to is Josh, one of my colleagues, posted that he feels like there's no way to have like a demo, static demo anymore because the product evolves so much, right, and becomes there is something cool and new every week that he always uses actually our production. That's what I do too, right? Like when I give a demo of our product, I just show how we use Resolve ourselves in production.
Love it. You touched on something. Best engineers, and you're hiring a really strong team at the moment. But you've also made a really good point, which isn't necessarily a reference to the team that you're building, but your best engineers can be a bottleneck in your team. And this can be around knowledge. And I think the notion is democratizing some of that knowledge to help us understand what you mean by that point. Your best engineers can be a bottleneck in your team.
First of all, I don't mean that negatively, right? Like I think what happens in practice, these systems become so complex. There is so much tribal knowledge that humans accumulate over time. So essentially, the most experienced engineers end up being like in firefighting mode all the time, right? So instead of like building, they have to be the ones troubleshooting every major incident and every challenge. And of course, when something goes wrong, it takes priority over everything else, right? You don't want an outage, right? You don't want the experience of your customers being affected. As a result, that's what I mean. Our best engineers become the folks that have to essentially always be involved, right? And that's not a good place for anybody, right? Like, let's say if I join a team as a new person, for the first few months, I probably have to always escalate to somebody. That's not a great place to be, right? And that's not something that anybody wants to do. And if I'm on the receiving end, it's also not great either, in that I get interrupted all the time. So we believe that, and that's what I was saying. We built Resolve in a way that can not only can process essentially data and telemetry and code, but it actually learns, right? It accumulates tribal knowledge over time and can become, the assistant every engineer can use any time of the day. It doesn't complain, it doesn't get tired, and can do all the hard and stressful work, right? Even if a human, needs to be in the loop to make a decision, Resolve can do all the work, give you an answer, and then you go execute a remediation, right? Or maybe you can ask Resolve to even do it. So that's kind of what we mean the problem is, and how we're approaching it.
I think you're pretty credible to answer this question. I say pretty credible, very credible. You've built businesses, you've been involved in acquisitions, you're hands on building a team, building production AI, let's call it. Where do you think AI projects will succeed? Where do you think AI projects will fail?
I obviously think like LLMs have improved quite a bit, right, in their ability to follow instructions, in their ability to reason with thinking models, in obviously their ability to summarize and maybe retrieve data. Obviously, they have been trained on. So obviously, this has very straightforward applications, right? Like, and I think we see this already in like, obviously, coding has been automated to a great extent, right? Like one of the things I shared, like models have solved coding, they haven't solved software engineering, and I truly think, obviously, the progress we made in coding is pretty amazing. Like majority of our code that Resolve is being generated now. Customer service is another good example, actually, of a problem where this can apply very well. I think what we're doing is kind of a step further, because we're dealing with multiple types of data. It's mostly textual data, so it fits well into models. But then you have to actually combine the data from all these modalities, right? Like you have source code, you have logs, you have metrics, you have infrastructure, you have changes. And essentially, what we're building is this multi-agent system. You can think of like an agent for its type of system. Oftentimes, you have multiple tools in its kind of category, so you have to essentially reason and combine and use tools for all this, right? So there is a lot of kind of planning, post-training type of work that you have to do to solve this well. So to answer your question, I do think that using AI in areas where models out of the box can do a good job is probably much more likely to make it successful. The moment you start going into like training or post-training of models, it becomes a much harder problem, right? Like if you have to make the model, if you have to build an agent, let's say, that invokes tools, that there's a long chain of thought, these become very, very hard problems. And I think it's very difficult to get it right.
Interesting. Okay. Where are you internally placing some bets for the next 3 to 6 months in terms of what you're building or baking into your system?
Yeah. So first of all, Resolve AI is used in production by many large customers. We see usage increasing dramatically even. Like I said, we started obviously, and this is still our primary use case, right? An AI SRE that helps you with alerts and incidents, but people use it now all the time for all sorts of other things, right? What we call vibe debugging. In our view, where we can think of as our approach or our efforts in three different areas. One is improving, let's say, the abilities of our agents. Handle more tasks, more complex tasks, become more accurate. Second is being able to cover more and more environments. Teach the agent to use new tools that we haven't seen before. And the third is, covering more of, let's say, the types of tasks a software engineer does, especially the toil of that work, right? So we started with like root cause analysis and getting to an answer and remediating incidents. But I think there is many other aspects of this, right? Like helping manage the underlying tools, start taking actions a lot more proactively. So eliminating more and more of that stressful, tedious, difficult work for humans.
Love it. Good luck on that. You're focusing fully on recruiting at the moment. That's your job. This is a perfect platform to be able to talk about the types of people that you're looking to bring into the team. Lots of people listen to the show, be very involved in tools like Resolve AI. So give us a bit of an idea as to some of the people that you'd be looking for to bring into your team and where.
So first of all, I've never worked this hard in my life, despite this is being my fourth company. And at the same time, I feel grateful, right? I feel grateful and lucky to be part of this evolution, of this change. Let's say that, I don't think another one has happened in our lifetime. Uh, I do think we're still at the beginning of what AI will do for our lives and how we work. I am a big believer that also this is going to be a very positive, going to have a very positive impact. Like sometimes, obviously, all of us in technology think, oh, are we going to have as many jobs in software engineering, or how is it going to how is it going to impact our kind of professional lives, right? First, I believe there are going to be a lot more people working in technology, but despite, I don't think that's really the goal here, right? Like the goal is to essentially build technology that improves human lives, right? I think by increasing our output, let's say 10x, we can solve problems that were impossible to solve before, and we can make essentially things that were very expensive and only available, let's say maybe to us in the Western world, to everybody at a much lower cost, right? And that's really the outcome we're aiming for here, right? Like I think that's what I hope AI is going to achieve for us. So as such, I think it's a very interesting time. Like Resolve AI created essentially this market. We've been operating, completely on first principles, and I think it's a very, very interesting opportunity for anybody who wants to be part of this wave, right? We're truly an AI first company. We're paving the way. There is no blueprint here, right? Like, and that's kind of what makes it so challenging. We're trying to figure out how to build, agents that do more and more of the work, do more and more of the thinking, the planning. So it's very, very interesting work, and it's very intense. It is at the frontier of AI and agents. So I would say for people who are ambitious, who actually kind of love working in kind of at the cutting edge. And this is true even not just for software engineers, right? It's true for folks who want to work in product and like in sales. I think if this is attractive, I think Resolve AI is a great company, and I also think as a company we have a lot of traction, right? We're growing very fast. I do think that financial outcomes matter as well, right? And uh, one thing I think about a lot is if we're right about AI, right, and how it's going to change our lives, I think it's better to bet at a startup at this point because the growth potential is way more than a big organization, right? Like it's not like some of the bigger companies that maybe the labs or like the cloud providers will probably be able to build a lot more value by working on AI, right? But okay, maybe they will go 2x, 3x. A startup, the right startup, is going to be able to actually have a lot more impact and both provide career growth and financial upside, I think, to everyone.
And that is something you know a fair bit about. And that's why I was buzzing to get you on the podcast, because you've been through this journey before. You're right, you're building in a space where it hasn't been built before, and there is actually a social mission attached to what you're trying to build as well. I definitely see you at the forefront of like playing in this space, building in this space, with some of the logos that you've been able to attract, some of the people that you've been able to attract. So if there are people who have deep context and understanding of observability systems and AI, I think you should definitely go and speak to Spiros, whether that's engineering, sales, marketing. You should definitely go and reach out to him. I want to say a massive thanks for coming to join us. It's been on the books for a couple of months. We finally made it happen. I have pestered you as well to make this happen, so I'm delighted. A massive thanks.
I really enjoyed it as well, Elliot, and I appreciate the opportunity, and thanks a lot. It was a great discussion.
My pleasure. For people listening, both Spiros and I have given almost our little pitch into Resolve, but all the likes, shares, subscribership, all that good stuff is massively appreciated. Reach out to the team on the careers site or reach out to Spiros himself. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this episode. Massively appreciate you listening and checking in with us. If you want to find out more about us and what we're doing, please check us out on social media. What we're trying to do at Engineers is build a community to drive knowledge sharing and experiences. On Twitter, we can be found Engineers.io. It's no_. We've also got a website, which is engineers.io. These links will all be posted in the description. Any feedback and comments are massively appreciated. We're always looking to improve on where we can. Thanks, guys.